Thank you for tuning in to the BizNation podcast. My name is Kerry Zarb, and I've been helping business owners just like you go from headache to heaven in a heartbeat for over 20 years. I'll be giving you all the top advice for getting started in your business, but I'll also be speaking with some of the best business minds to inspire you with valuable insights to help you get ahead in your business. If you've ever hit a roadblock or lost your passion, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to the BizNation podcast. I'm Kerry and this is episode 69. On today's show, we have David from Six Gun right here in Melbourne, who specialises in SEO and digital marketing. David really helps business owners reach their online potential. David's been on the show once before. We chatted all about SEO, and I've brought him back so that we can unpack other things about marketing to help you guys who are small business owners. Welcome to the show, David.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, Kerry. It's always a pleasure.
Lovely. I appreciate your time so much. And I'm super excited today because we're going to go next level. We're going to talk about different things. Like I said before, that, the last podcast that we did, we really dived into SEO. So, and I just know that you've got so much more to bring the listener and, really bring it home and help them, in their marketing endeavors for their business. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
No, an absolute pleasure.
Awesome. So, David, let's start at the beginning. I want to talk about when a business first starts up, what do they need to do? Where do they need to go? And what are they going to do for marketing? Is there any advice that you can give to the listener to get started in marketing when they first start their business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll get to the platforms in a minute. But probably the first thing that people really need to grapple with is the USP of the business. So what is it about their offer or what they're selling that is enticing to a buyer? Is it, is the business model based on having the lowest prices? Is it based on having, the fastest turnaround? Is it based on having the highest quality? Every business needs to have an angle, a USP, and a target market that they want to go after. Obviously, every business is different and there's no right or wrong answer. So getting clear on those kind of things, I think, is a really good prerequisite to the next piece of kind of how do you take that and kind of get it out there into the world. So you firstly have to understand who you are. You have to understand what the USPs of the business are. You have to understand who you're going after specifically. After going after someone who wants quality, you're going after someone that wants a low price. There's obviously a different marketing message that needs to accompany that.
Awesome.
Once a business gets a bit of clarity around, okay, what is the USP? What problem are they really solving? How are they articulating that message? Who it's to? You need to think about, okay, how do we get that message out into market? And there's a number of different ways to do that. If you look at channels, and probably a good way to think about it is, and probably a good way to think about where to begin is also, you can break it down into the intention of a buyer, and then, top of funnel kind of them discovering the brand. And let me explain that a little bit more. So if you sell a product or service that a lot of people search for, so let's say they go into Google and they search for it. So let's say, you're a plumber. You want to start your own plumbing business. You've been working on the tools for a long time. You want to start your own business, kind of get out and do it yourself and hire a few apprentices and the rest of it. People go onto Google and they type in plumber Melbourne or plumber suburb. That's how people find plumbers. They have an immediate need that needs to be solved. When people type those keywords into Google, for example, they are ready to find a plumber right then and there. They're not looking, in the future. Like, a plumber doesn't really need to, let's say, if you're starting as a plumber, you don't really need to build, brand. You need immediate leads more importantly than building brand. As the business grows, yes, brand's important. It's something to look at. But at the very start, I'd say lead generation is the most important thing. So, because people search in that way, plumber Melbourne, for example, you want to make sure that you're coming up on Google either through paid mechanisms like Google Ads or SEO, things like that as well, because that's how people search for that product. Now, let's say take another type of business. So let's say you're a in the fashion space and you're starting a business selling dresses, and let's say there's nothing particularly identifiable about how these dresses can be searched for. So they're not custom made or handmade dresses, in which case there might be a bit more of a case to do things that have intention. But let's say you just sell like, standard kind of, middle of the range dresses. People might type in black dress and you want to be coming up on Google and things like that. Now, a keyword like black dress, you're going to have a lot of trouble, particularly as a startup, ranking for a keyword like that organically. You're going to pay probably an astronomical, well, you're going to pay, quite a bit as well to have it come up in Google Ads or Google Shopping, things like that as well. So, a brand that is where you're unable to compete where there is intention, you probably need to shift towards something like social media marketing, where you're, getting in front of people that don't necessarily know they want the product until they see it. So where you've got a plumber, no one's going to see an ad on Facebook and be like, hey, like I need a plumber. Like pretty much all plumbing inquiries, people know they need a plumber for something, and they'll go through a mechanism of typing something in order to, bring up a plumber's details and then call them. But with something in the fashion space, something like the social media channels like Facebook is usually a better starting point than, for example, SEO and Google Ads, because it's far less costly to invest in that channel. You're also appealing to people that there isn't necessarily an intention. That a young female audience, for example, they're always looking at different clothes to buy and things like that. So it's not a one-off type of a situation where there's only intention behind it. So if you think about it from that perspective, I think you have to understand, do you want to come up when people have the intention to buy it, or is your product the kind of product or service that people don't necessarily need to know that they want it or need it until they see it?
Yeah.
And if you bring that back to the startup space, like in the startup space, there's a lot of products, services that are quite new to market that don't really have an established base in terms of like what to even call them, for example. So again, that makes intention-based searching very, very hard. If you've got a product, for example, or a service that's a little bit unique in the way that people don't really search for it, they don't really know that they need it or want it until they see it.
Yeah.
Then you kind of need to adjust the marketing, to kind of fit.
Yeah, good point. And I almost put it in the perspective of going to the supermarket. We all need milk, we all need bread, those things are positioned accordingly in the supermarket because, normally, particularly the milk, it's a deep dive into the milk section so that you pass everything else that can grab your attention, So when I think of what you've just said, David, from the Google space of what people search for when they're in need, like a service, or, they need something in particular. And that can be, obviously into products as well. But like you said, that plumber is going to definitely be Googled over being found on Facebook or Instagram, because that's a service that just comes up. Your hot water services just cacked itself and you need someone to help you. You go on Google, go on to the yellow pages. We're all online, and our fingers still do the walking, essentially, like they used to say for the yellow pages. But yeah, and again, those things that we want and things that we want to buy, the optional purchases, perhaps the products, are the ones that we will see on Facebook, on Instagram, those happening kind of places. So I agree with that. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. So I think, as a business, people need to decide on, what platform is the best starting point, because normally that's the trickiest part, right?
Yeah.
Once a business is more established, usually it's a combination of a little bit of everything,
Mm-hmm.
pulling out the best parts of each platform to support the goals of the business. But when a business is, a startup, and it's kind of like, okay, we kind of only have the funds to do one thing, and kind of see how that goes, which is often the case. You want to be picking wisely as to which channel that is, based on, is it the kind of thing people search for? And if it is the kind of thing people search for directly, do you have the capacity to compete against the other people in that industry? So for example, the example of the let's say the small fashion shop that's just started up, they want to sell their black dress, but they're up against, the Iconic, for example, and they're up against, at the same end, they're up against Target, they're up against Kmart, they're up against, all of the big fashion boutiques. Like they're up against these brands that they're so established, both physically and digitally, that it is very hard to compete organically in the organic search side of things. And there are challenges to compete on the the paid side of things because there is a lot of competition there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to touch on another point, thinking of bricks and mortar stores, it's really Google My Business that can help them first and foremost. Would you agree with that, David?
Yeah, so the Google My Business is really useful for those local searches. So, let's say you're a plumber and you're in Blackburn, and you've got your little your factory where you run a few kind of trucks and cars out of, vans, whatever it may be. You've got a little factory in Blackburn. Then if someone types in plumber Blackburn, you're very likely to come up in that three pack. So through local searches, if you're the kind of business that attracts local searches, plumber's a perfect example of that. Google My Business is a very important aspect of what you want to be doing with your SEO.
Mm,
Definitely.
yeah.
But then, if you're a service that let's say you're a digital service that can be delivered nationwide, the Google My Business has less of a pull, because someone searching, from Perth, for example, for a particular service, no matter what that would be, it's very unlikely, unless they're typing in the brand name, that a Google My Business kind of listing is going to come up for a business in Melbourne. It's just,
Yeah.
it's just simply not the way that it works. So again, you'd have to look at, is there local intention based on what it is? Plumber's a perfect example. A fashion kind of a store that posts Australia wide, for example, is probably an example of one that Google My Business probably wouldn't be as applicable for, because people are unlikely to search, dress suburb. That's probably not really going to happen. Even dress Melbourne. I mean, people know that, if they want to dress, they go to the Myers, or they go to shop online with the, all of the big players that are already established. So it's a bit of
Yeah,
a
definitely. You're listening to the BizNation podcast. I would love to connect with you outside of the podcast, and you can find me on Clubhouse, Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn by searching my name, Kerry Zarb, or directly on my website at kerryzarb.club. And don't forget, if you need more support in your business, you can find the community on Facebook at BizNation Support Group. And that kind of segues to the next kind of part of the podcast today is we wanted to talk about platforms. You mentioned it earlier, and we've kind of headed in that direction, touching on Google My Business. So if we're starting a business, how do we know which platform to be on? That's such a tough question, right?
Yeah, it is tough. And it kind of ties back to the first bits of this conversation, in the sense of, you know, the USP, the target market, and then kind of like how do people find these products generally? Is it by searching like a plumber, or is it by discovering the product because it's perhaps new to market? And there isn't really a lot of search volume. People aren't really searching for it because it's kind of this new thing. And again, that would dictate kind of quite heavily where to go and where to begin. But some good rules of thumb to consider, you know, Google Ads and SEO are very, very good on those intention-based searches. If you have a brand that lends itself well to that, and the competition is, you can compete against it. And particularly if you can do things a bit more locally, like if your keywords lend themselves to work well with a local specifier, like the plumber Blackburn, for example, then the search space, SEO, Google Ads, perfect place to begin and invest time. On the other side, if your product doesn't really do that, there isn't enough search volume or search intent for the product, or it's too hard to compete, and it's the kind of product that people would likely purchase just by kind of seeing it in their newsfeed. Fashion's a pretty good example of that. Then Facebook is a really good place to begin, and that kind of flows into Instagram. So when I say Facebook, the Facebook ads platform basically ties into Instagram, because Facebook owns Instagram. So when I say Facebook ads, I ultimately mean Facebook and Instagram bundled together. The other one to consider if you're in the B2B space would be LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn's a challenge from an ads perspective. I think, as a business, you'd probably try to utilize it a little bit more in the organic in the organic kind of like using it organically in the sense of putting up good content, reaching out to possibly prospects and providing an offer a bit more directly. There's a few different ways to use it for those kind of purposes. Ads with LinkedIn are extremely expensive to run. Cost per click is substantially higher than Facebook, Google Ads, that side of things. But it's the only platform that allows like the kind of targeting based on things like job titles, where they're working, and like these really kind of business statistics. So let's say if you're a service provider that's targeting high-end businesses and the value of a sale is very, very high, then LinkedIn would be a good place, but you have to kind of calibrate your expectations to that. So let's say, you're targeting, the biggest, ASX 200 companies, and you want to, be talking with a technology officer or someone that looks after their kind of IT to help roll out like you might have a service that helps with um, like internal training, for example, like a digital platform. And there's like a licensing fee for every user so that, when it gets extrapolated out over 2,000 users a year, it ends up being $100,000 sale. So in an instance like that, you can spend a lot of time, money targeting these right people in the right ways. LinkedIn makes perfect sense for that kind of situation.
Yeah.
But I would be careful with it, if you have a lower cost product, um, it's hard to get an ROI out of it because the cost per clicks can be very, very, very high as a result.
Mhm. Gotcha. Right. So let's unpack that for a second. So LinkedIn, if I wanted to sell black dresses, I would not be on LinkedIn. I
You're
would
not
be on,
selling.
right? Good. I'm just making sure I'm understanding this. And then if I was a service based business for other businesses, I would be on LinkedIn. So back to the black dress, I should be on Facebook, Instagram kind of spaces. These are like the top tips of where to start, and start testing because we've all
Yeah.
got to test. And then
Yeah.
okay, so let me try and find a real curveball here. Okay,
Yeah.
no, it's not going to come to me. I can feel it already, but I just want to kind of okay, so if I had online courses
Yeah.
for let's pick something like, DIY craft in your home, like someone that wanted to learn how to knit or how to sew, where
Yeah.
would we be?
I think that's got Facebook written all over it.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So with, and each platform kind of has its own targeting mechanisms as well. So, when you look at the search side of things, Google Ads, SEO, you're really targeting based on what people type in. People type in a keyword, you match that intention with the desire to come up. Whereas, let's look at Facebook. You're targeting people based on their interests. So we can target people based on their location, the fact that they're interested in knitting and crafts. We can target them based on, you know, what they have an affinity towards. So we can gauge things like, um, household income and things like that if it's a higher value product or a lower value product. There's a whole bunch of kind of targeting options, but we can't target people based on immediate intention like we can with the search channels. So we can't target people based on what they're looking for right this second, but we can target people based on kind of what they're interested in, what they like, and what Facebook's algorithm also kind of determines that they fall into as a bucket.
Definitely. That makes perfect sense. And I'm glad I had that suggestion just pop into my brain there about the craft. I was actually surprised I brought that home, to be honest.
That was good. That was a good, perfect example.
Yay. Awesome. And David, just quickly, and we won't unpack this too much, but obviously, depending on the business that you are starting up, another key aspect is the website, right?
Yeah, of course. So,
Yeah.
you need to make sure that the user flow is working quite well. And that starts with, USP, understanding kind of what you're saying. And then, the page that we're going to be sending the traffic to, the website, making sure that it, marries up very well with what we've decided and also marries up very well with the ads and what we're offering and things like that. That has that like, clean, high quality design and things like that. So the website is a very important aspect in the conversion cycle to get someone to become a customer.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to flip over to email marketing because I think this is one that surfaces later in our business life sometimes, or
Yeah.
sometimes it's completely off the radar
Yeah.
and totally forgotten.
Yeah.
So again, using those examples, the black dress, the plumber, the craft courses, where does email marketing fit in, do you believe, in industry and brand spaces?
Yeah. So for most Well, I'd say for most businesses, email marketing should be one that's on the top of their list. Certainly towards the top of the list, because email marketing is one of those ones that you should be collecting people's emails through a variety of mechanisms, whether that be existing customers, whether that be offering them something to get an email address, for example, like a free ebook or something like that. Email marketing is still probably the highest return on investment marketing channel that there is in digital. So it's very much worth doing, and it is also a channel where you own the data. Whereas, it can be a little bit crazy to be focused on building, a high number of Facebook likes to your page, for example, when only a very small percentage of those people see your posts when they go out, and you don't have any control over it. Whereas email, you've got complete control. You can email all the people in that list; they'll all get that email. I mean, there will be some that end up in spam filters and don't kind of come through and whatever. There's always, deliverability issues when it comes to email to some degree, but you ultimately control the messaging and you can do whatever you want with that, basically do whatever you want with it. So it's a very good place to be building in the background as the business grows from day one. Now there's industries where it makes more sense, right? So I don't think there's too many plumbers out there that really have an email database, because
Oh,
it's one of those things that, you know, unless you're a plumber that does like, let's say maintenance as opposed to like fixing an immediate problem. Now, let's be honest, like, a lot of appliances require some kind of plumbing maintenance, but people don't really do that. Like, it's just not, unless perhaps you're in the commercial space and then it might be, like a compliance related thing that has to be done. Um, in which case that might be a little bit of a different angle. But for the average plumber that's doing residential work, how important is an email list? Probably not that important, because who's hearing from their plumber? And again, like what is that? How is that going to work? But I mean,
mm,
just because it isn't being done doesn't mean it couldn't be done well. If you had a plumber and you had like, put all your customers in an email list and then sent them like, tips every 6 months around like, oh, we're heading into winter, do these things to make sure that your, appliances last more. You'll probably end up getting a customer base that is extremely loyal to you. Whenever there's a problem, they're going to be hitting you up, which is what you want ultimately anyway. So there is still, I haven't really seen it being done in that space because there's probably higher things on the list in terms of priority. But the reality is it could probably be done extremely well,
mm.
with good long-term effects.
I think so. I think you've tapped into something there, David. So for all those plumbers that are listening, for all those plumbers that are tuned in, and maybe we'll put, plumbers in here as one of the key words, plumber business owner or something like that. This could be a thing, because I would, if I had a plumber that I was using and they were going to send me maintenance tips, that's actually cool. And further, I actually have subscribed in recent months to someone that does, I think they do gardening. They actually do gardening. They do landscaping, but they do the gardening maintenance as well. And they send out tips,
Yeah.
of how to care for your plants and, when to fertilize your grass and all this kind of stuff for those that want to DIY in between their service options. So I think that could be a thing, and maybe should be a thing, like you said.
Yeah. And I think there's probably a difference between, there's a difference between marketing activities that lead to a direct sale now and marketing activities that build loyalty that lead to business growth later. And you kind of have to play those off, right, in terms of where your resources go. Because most people, when they are thinking about marketing, they want leads now.
Yep.
They don't want to put in a system where it's like, oh, it's going to take us a year to get, and then we got to send all these emails. I don't know too many tradies that enjoy the digital aspects of things. I don't know how many of them would be keen to do something with email, but it is something that would definitely have long-term, substantial, positive business effects.
Yeah, for
And then,
sure.
and then if you flip over to something like e-commerce, like the black dress example, the small fashion stores kind of starting online and maybe with a small retail business, that is the perfect example of a business that should be doing email from day one, because everyone in that space wants, the email with a, 20% off special, things like that.
Yeah.
You've got the ability to send out an email and generate a lot of business, a lot of sales from a single email. Even just collecting emails from existing customers or like previous customers, every time someone purchases from you, they go into your database, things like that. Over the course of years, you end up building quite a substantial database. You have a Mother's Day special or something, 25% off all stock. for 24 hours, like you can generate a lot of business through things like that. Now, obviously, some businesses don't want to be on, do the sales or do the sales rarely and things like that. And that has to be kind of balanced as well. But building that email database for an e-commerce business will have tremendous value in the long run.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. David, we're stepping into the next part of the podcast today. Now, I want to know, I should say, I want to know 5 fun facts about David, but there's a method here. There's a method to my madness. I have this little tin. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm going to randomly select. I've got a multitude of questions in this little box. I'm going to randomly select 5 questions that I'm going to ask you. There's number 1. Number 2, I'll go for some little ones. Number 3, I have to count, otherwise I'll lose track. Clearly, I'm not able to count on my fingers at the moment. All right, I've got 5 questions.
Okay.
I'm closing the little box. One more rattle. All right, here we go. Are you ready, David?
I'm ready.
Okay. Your first question is, are you a morning marvel or a night owl?
Oh, I think I oscillate a little bit. I think since COVID, definitely a night owl.
Yeah.
I haven't gotten up too early in a long time. But I think normally, like when I'm back in the office kind of environment, I'm probably a morning marvel. So I think I can probably do a little bit of both, depending on where I'm at.
You're the chameleon of that space by the sound of it.
I'm just always tired, basically. That's
exactly. All right. Question number 2. If you could choose another era to live in, when would it be and why?
I don't know. I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with this era, to be honest. I mean, I'm very, I feel like I'm very appreciative and grateful just to be here, have the experience of this life that I've been given. So I don't think I can answer that any other way other than saying this era, I feel like is the era.
You are staying put. You are here.
What? I'm a happy camper.
Love it. Love it. All right. Next question. Now, this one's a tough one.
Okay.
Driver or be driven? So, are you the driver or are you a good passenger or a backseat driver?
Yeah, I think I prefer to drive, both physically when I'm actually driving or metaphorically. So I think I'll go with the driver option.
Awesome. Love that. All right. Next question is, do you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
Look, I probably generate more energy. It's kind of tricky. I'm really kind of on the fence with that. Like, I'm very good. I enjoy alone time, but I also enjoy in the right format. Like chatting, networking, all that kind of stuff. So I think again, it's kind of hard to answer.
50-50.
I'd say if I had to answer one way or the other, I'd probably say introverted.
Yep.
As opposed to extroverted.
Cool. I'll let you off. All right. Last question. Are you a sports fan? And if so, which is your favorite one?
Oh, I've recently got into Formula One.
Oh, yes.
And I have just absolutely my wife's dad has been to Formula One forever. So it's just like we just, we all talk about it all the time now. And it stemmed from watching, I don't know if you've seen this, but I think it was called Drive to Survive on Netflix.
Yes.
And they've done such a good job of making this documentary series thing. Like anyone that watches it, you're just so inspired. You've got 20 of the best drivers in the world. It's so hard to even get there. And these people just have like the work ethic and the philosophy, and just everything that you see about the system is extremely inspiring. They do a great job. So it really sucked me into Formula One. And now now I kind of watch it regularly. And I think the next one's on this weekend, because it was a bit of a 3-week break after the first one that they did. So yeah, it's Formula One for me is really has sucked me in.
Oh, mate, you're speaking my language. And when I say that, I don't, because it's in the wee hours. So night owl, morning marvel, like I'm a morning marvel. So I can't do it. But hubby's into it like 100%. And in actual fact, he started watching Formula E, I think it is now, which is another category. They're like electric cars, but they're flat and low. Heaps of collisions and stuff. It's crazy. They're in at the time of this podcast when we're recording, by the way. They're in Rome at the moment, and the circuit is tight. Like it is really, really tight. But I love all things car racing. They're not called the V8 supercars anymore, but supercars are like heaven, Bathurst. Oh my God. We're so on the same page here. This is awesome.
Awesome.
We could go on all day, but thank you. They were a little bit challenging, those questions. And again, random selection out of that. I'm going to give it a name. I'll call the little tin thing something at some point, but that was great. Thanks for participating, David. Appreciate that.
No, pleasure.
Awesome. So before we wrap it up, we must know, where can we find you?
So probably the best way to find us is on our website, which is just sixgun.com.au. But, places like LinkedIn, Facebook, we're all over that as well. So feel free to, pop in and say hello there.
Fantastic. David, I'm going to pop all those links in the show notes once again for the listeners. And this has been fun. This has been awesome, and heaps of good value and advice for those starting a business and looking at their marketing and options and, what we should do and where we can possibly sit in the market. It's huge. It's a massive, massive topic. So yeah, really appreciate your time, David. That's been great.
No, thank you so much for having me on.
No worries. I'll chat to you again really soon. Thanks so much and take care.
You too, Kerry. Talk soon.
Thank you for tuning in to the BizNation podcast. It was lovely to share this episode with you. Remember to subscribe to catch all future episodes, and I would also very much love it if you'd leave me a rating or a review. Until next time, remember that you can also go from headache to heaven in a heartbeat.